Hello, welcome. This is another time of gathering in order to have time for conversation. And my partner for conversation is Steve Reigle today. Steve works for the counseling service, and I'm going to let him start by introducing what he does and where all this works for him.
Okay. So, my title at the Counseling Services, I'm the coordinator of supported employment. What that really means is that I help all the different clients that we have at the Counseling Services with employment, career, training, finding appropriate jobs, keeping jobs once they have them, training supports, career assessments, really helping people get to where they want to be in their life. So that's like the overreaching. But one of the things that we really know about employment is it's one of the most effective methods to help folks struggling with any form of mental health concern. And it's one of the best researched methods towards recovery. And more employment is great for people. We also help people. There's a misnomer, if you will, that's pretty common, that somebody who's receiving Social Security benefits of some sort of disability benefits, can't work. And so we also help them figure out how they can manage their benefits. We help them when things go wrong, when Social Security gets it wrong many times. We'll help with appeals and those sorts of things, but really help people to feel confident that they can foray back into work without a lot of penalty.
That sounds like a pretty busy job.
It can be. So our little team of 5, we have about 80 active clients in employment at almost any given time in 4 distinct programs, which are differently funded with grants and such. So we have different ways we have to report this to the state, so to speak, as well, which is that's what keeps it busy.
So are you working then with a lot of employers in the area, or do you go beyond the area?
Yeah, so we try and stay in Addison County, but honestly, people move around, right? So we get down to northern Rutland County, down Brandon especially, and southern Chittenden County. For somebody who lives in Starksboro and might be working with us in Addison County, Chittenden County is closer than Middlebury. So they, transportation-wise or, other connection-wise, that might be a better place than southern Chittenden County.
I like what you're talking about and what you're doing, and that's really helpful to people. But I was saying to myself, what would I know about that? Not too much. So how did you get from where you were before? How did you get to this job here?
So okay,
and this skill.
Yeah, well,
okay.
So this is a second career for me. I've been with the Counseling Service, or CSAC, for almost 14 years now. So, boy, how did I get this skill? It's a combined set of skills. So, my first career was in college and university food services. So I started out my career at the University of Rochester in Rochester, New York. And life, again, like our job, my job, it's about connection with people. So somewhere about 1996, I applied for the director of dining position at Middlebury College. And you know what? I never heard anything from Middlebury College, which was really interesting. So, and I talked to my wife and let her know that I had applied for this, and she was a little put off, like she wasn't real into, okay, let's just go and move. And so a year later, I actually was promoted to be the director of dining services at the University of Rochester, and out of the blue, George Whitney, who's retired from Middlebury College, was the operations director at that point, calls me out of the blue and says, hey, we'd like to bring you in and interview you for the director of dining services position here at Middlebury College. And so I had this great hour-long conversation with George pretty much a no thank you conversation, but it was, a great conversation. I really liked the man. It was just really natural. So fast forward a year, my friend who was the director of dining services at the University of Rochester when I first started there. His name was Pete Napolitano. And Peter actually got the job at Middlebury. So a year and a half later, I can't remember what it was, but Pete calls me up out of the blue and says, "Hey, Steve, this is Pete." And we're just talking, and it's like, "I got this job up here at Middlebury College, and I want you to come up and take a look at it." And they had just built this new facility called the Grill. And so the job was to come in and run that facility for them. And so I came up, and the most incredible set of interviews. I did 11 interviews in one day at Middlebury College. Many of those were multiple interviews, multiple people interviews,
Right.
that sort of thing, in August, in a suit. And I'm wandering around, and of course at the time, there's no air conditioning anywhere at Middlebury College. This is 1998. So my family came up, and they were looking we spent 4 days in the Middlebury area. So anyway, I was the eventual candidate, and 2 weeks later, I'm here. We gave my notice at the University of Rochester, and we started the move up here, and it was pretty neat because on the way here, we actually we sold our house in Rochester using picket fences, which is basically a do-it-yourself sort of real estate thing with a little bit of support. And my wife sold the house on the drive between Rochester and here. So I was thinking, okay, well, the house is going to
That's
take
a good ride.
3 months to sell, right? It wasn't a market like today is. And so I get here, and I call her up to say that I had made it to Middlebury, like it's a 5-hour ride. And she's like, "Oh, I got good news. I sold the house today." I'm like, "You what?" I'm like, so now I have to find a place for us all to live here too. So, which all worked out great. So in 1998, moved to Middlebury and came over and worked at Middlebury College and had a great time there, and really enjoyed my coworkers, my customers, everything there. And but we came to the Great Recession, and they started to offer these crazy packages for voluntary separation packages and different things. And I'm like, okay, I've been doing this work now for a quarter century, 25 years in that industry, and I was like, I'm really ready to do something different. And so I took one of the voluntary separation programs without a plan. My dad said to me at the time, he said, "What are you, crazy? What are you doing? You got a family, you got, one of your daughters is about to go to college and all this sort of stuff." So I'm like, I don't know, I'll figure it out, So, so the one day, after I had left the college, 6 weeks, and I I didn't have a plan, but I had painted every room in my house, caught up with every piece of work I needed to do, and I said to my wife, I have to go get a job. I'm ready. And she's like, okay. And so I opened up the Addison Independent, and I saw an ad for a job coach position at CSAC. Now, I had always hired folks with disabilities at the University of Rochester and at Middlebury College. We were supporters, and we worked with the DO program, the first diversified occupations program at Middlebury High School, very closely while at Middlebury College. And I actually had hired a lot of people post high school from that program, and they came in, they did work experiences with us, and I had hired this young man who I hired him as a dishwasher, and he did really great. He worked really hard, and he eventually got promoted into prep cook and a cook. Well, this young man came in on my last day. He came in several hours before the start of his shift, just to say goodbye to me on my last day. And I had held it together all day that day until I was walking out the door, and this young man came in to thank me for the opportunities I had given him. So that's still fresh in my mind. That's 6 weeks fresh in my mind when I walk out the door at Middlebury College, and then I see this ad. I'm like, well, okay, this is just Providence. So off I go. I apply for this position at the counseling service, and they hired me. So what how did I get prepared to answer your question?
Okay.
How was I prepared to do this job? Because I had employed all these wonderful folks that we serve at the counseling service. All these consumers, these customers of ours, I had employed them as a manager in my previous roles. And so it was a natural. And my first day as a job coach, when I walked into the 109 building at Catamount Park at CSAC, it was really clear because over half of the consumers there on the DS, the developmental services side of the agency, knew me by name and were very excited that I was working for CSAC. So I already knew half of the people that I was going to be working with, which was awesome.
Before you chose to make that switch, and did you know that you really were a counselor? That you really had all the characteristics and the interest and the disposition to do that?
So if you're
yeah,
a manager of any sort, you're a counselor. You really are. Like if you've and I had some wonderful, wonderful training and mentors throughout my career in the food business. It's a little different than being a counselor, but there's so many similarities. There's so many similarities in the different things that counselors use.
Tell me about what are the similarities, some of them.
You might, as a manager, you might, take somebody aside and talk about a behavior that's not acceptable. Maybe there was an anger outburst, or maybe there was, they had an issue with a coworker and that just really blew up. So you might sit somebody down, as a manager and say, look, hey, you can't act like this, Len. You can't do this. You can't, right? This is not acceptable behavior in our workplace, right? So as a manager, you talk about it, you come to some agreement, and you ask how you can help a little bit. But really, the expectation as a manager is that somebody's going to correct their behavior. Fast forward to what my job is now. This all still happens, but now I help somebody with the nuts and bolts of actually correcting that behavior. Let's go feed this in. Let's talk about what caused you to become angry with this situation that really wasn't a big deal. Let's talk about that. Let's plug in with your counselor, your therapist. A little deeper on that. Let's get a little team meeting going to see how we can support this in the future. And so it's very similar, just sort of different sides of the same coin. Is how I look at it.
So what you're doing now is really consistent of where you started.
In a lot of ways.
Yeah, in a lot of ways.
In a lot of ways.
And now there's some things of new skills that you've learned.
Oh, absolutely.
And that you want to share. And,
boy, the new skills, like, managers don't have to have empathy.
Okay, say about that. Talk about that.
Yeah, managers just say, okay, this is not okay. You have to fix this. You don't, there's a power dynamic there.
Right.
My work these days is more about the empathy. I have empathy for the folks that I'm working with. You see the sort of the other side of it. You see the struggles that people are having with. It's not just as simple as making a change sometimes. So manager, you don't have to care. In my role, you have to care. You have to care. It's got to be important that somebody is supported and has the tools available to, and the support's available to be able to make those changes for themselves.
Yeah. I sense that you, from the time we've known each other, that you really have a sense for what it means to listen and what it means to talk. And you enjoy doing both, right?
Actually, I think I enjoy listening more.
Yeah, okay. You and I are on the same wavelength. I'm a better listener than I am a talker. Although my sisters didn't agree with that. They thought I talked too much.
If you saw me at a party or something, I'm not necessarily the life of the party.
Okay.
But sometimes, like in my work, you would think that, because my work requires that of me. My work sometimes requires that I be very outgoing.
Right.
Which is really sometimes outside of my comfort zone a little bit.
Okay. That's that kind of honest admission of where we are. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, when you came to Vermont, was that a new beginning, a new surprise for you, or had you been thinking about Vermont?
So it's a very interesting. Somehow, in my younger years, I had some wisdom, and the wisdom was to listen to some of my elders.
Yeah.
I was very close. My great uncle, Richard, he was a carpenter by trade, and he was awesome. But he said to me one time, after he retired and moved to this great place on the shores of Lake Erie,
Mm-hmm.
he said, "Stephen," he says, "you got to figure out a way to live where you would otherwise vacation." And
that's a good
that
phrase.
was probably 10 or 12 years before we moved to Middlebury.
Mm-hmm.
But that one comment just stuck in my head. And when we came here, it was like going back to my childhood in a different way. My town had grown up. This was still small town. It was very nice to come to Middlebury and see the surrounding area. And I'm not a skier. I'm a true flatlander.
Okay.
In the wintertime, I drill holes in the ice and fish through them. So, so the skiing wasn't the attraction, but it was just the small town,
Mm-hmm.
the rural environment, and just being able to be where I would otherwise be on vacation,
Mm-hmm.
which was awesome.
Yeah. So you met a lot of people that are good friends now.
Yes.
And some of they are people you still stay in touch with. And
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely.
that's a great thing. When we were together for that little party that was held after the trustees or after the board did its planning day.
Yep.
We were remembering one time. There's so many more than one times, but I went back and checked it out. It was 2018. It was the annual meeting of the Counseling Service Board, and we did a lot that night in the program with plays. We started with a play that was really a lively thing, and Bob Thorne narrated a poem on the journey together, and then in the middle of this we had a little sequence having to do with the services that are available through the counseling service. So there was one on resilience and the people from children and family did that, and then there was another one on open dialogue, and that team did that, and they ended up having a theme song at the end. I didn't know they had a theme song, and they sang their theme song, and we all tried to join in. But then, right in the middle of that, there was one with your group, and it was for me and for many others. It was the pinnacle of that particular little exercise. So tell us about that.
Oh my Lord! So we really were trying to give the flavor of what it was like to give help to somebody and also receive help from us around employment services at CSAC. And so we had a general outline, honestly, as to what was going to go on. But Len, you worked with Rick Wheeler and I,
Right.
who was my boss at the time, and I think you were a little nervous about, geez, these guys aren't really prepared at all.
Rick, no, that's right. Because Rick, well, I knew Rick before, and Rick and I would meet over the coffee out in the lobby, when they had that little cart,
Yep.
for that time period, and sometimes he'd be quiet, and other times he'd be outrageously funny, and so we'd go back. So I knew when he was pulling my chain, and he was being kind of ornery that day when we talked about it.
He was.
And he said, now, we're going to do this, but we're not going to tell you or tell each other what we're going to do. And I said, thank you. We're looking forward to it. And so
we had a rough skit planned out, and
Right.
And Rick was going to be the client, and I was going to be the employment counselor. So we pretty much just set up what was going to be a normal transaction. What we would normally do, that first meeting, what that would look like in a brief form for this program. Well, what I didn't know was what Rick was going to do to me during that. So he did everything he could to throw me for a loop, to throw me off my game. He pulled every trick in the book that he could, and it ended up just being hysterical. But it was also very true to life as to what really would happen for us. And because you do get thrown sometimes by what people might
Sure.
say.
Sure.
And you try not to react to that, but it was hysterical. And the entire room was in stitches across this skit that we did. It came out really well. We couldn't do it a second time.
No, I know you couldn't, and it was. I was in the back in the against the wall, and able to see everything that was going on and all the people, and there were a number of clients who had come to participate and were having a good time being part of this that adventure that night. And then there were quite a few staff people there. There was a board members, there was a community people. So it was truly the representative of our community and of the organization. And I was able to see the whole picture. And what was happening is when you were doing these things to make each other stumble or whatever, to give you, it was just, I've never seen a group of people laughed together the way I did in that situation. The laughter was loud and full and was really impressive, and I thought this is what the counseling service is all about: is people connecting to each other, people feeling good about what it means to be helpful to each other.
Yeah.
So that was really a memorable night, and for you and for me and for I think everybody else.
Yeah, we had a great. That was a great time, and it was a total surprise.
Yeah. So as you think about your work and as you think about the counseling service, do you see some things that that of that nature that we want to encourage to continue to be part of the life of the counseling service and the life of our community? So you have some things that you'd like to see happening?
So, just our community, Middlebury, Virgins, Bristol, they're really supportive of us as the counseling service, of what we do, our clients. I was just doing this, we hired a new compliance officer who I just met yesterday. And I was going through this list and I said, do you know that from the start of the pandemic to the end of the pandemic, we placed people with 53 different and new employers that we didn't work with prior to the pandemic or didn't have somebody placed. And it was a figure that we kept, which was just, it was surprising. But none of my work can be successful without all of the local employers. Without the school systems. We work with all the guidance departments, as far as transitioning folks from high school into our adult programs. The folks in the school systems do a great job and get folks to us, the families. Of course, all the different staff members at CSEC. We try and work collaboratively in teams for the benefit of the people we're working with as much as we possibly can. Try to have some fun. Because you know what? That's what it's about. That's, we have fun with each other. I think the staff really enjoy each other, and that's really what's important.
One of the keys to that affirmation is the numbers that show up in terms of how long people have worked and stayed at the counseling service. Just the high numbers. Yours is 14. That's a long time.
So one of my coworkers, Steve Bourgeois, he was actually the first person in the state of Vermont. He had the first grant to do supported employment. And he's, I think, at 34 years right now.
Is that right?
I believe it's in that ballpark. But he was the first. What a great set of institutional memory to have as a part of your team. Is this guy who was on, right there at the beginning, when we took people from the Brandon Training School at that point, where it had closed down, and we were really helping people to develop lives in the community instead of being institutionalized. And Steve was at the forefront of that. Employment was at the forefront. People were thinking about this right at the beginning. Look, this is part of what everybody does. Employment is what everybody does. So everybody should do employment. That's what it is.
That's right.
And it's great. The other thing is we call it supported employment, but it's really competitive employment. It's jobs that are advertised for, that people interview for. We help people with that. We'll work on site with managers sometimes so that they can give an instruction once, and maybe one of our job coaches can reinforce that 6 times until somebody learns their job. So we're there to assist the employers as well, which is just great. And we listen to people.
We talked also recently about Rick Wheeler. And I had heard someone say to me that there's a man that works at the counseling service who's really quite sick. And I said, who is that? He didn't know, and I finally found out that it was Rick. And this is right in the pandemic, and so contacts are very hard. And finally, I was able to connect with him by phone, and we had some good conversations, and, and over the phone. And he did an interesting thing with Bob Thorne. He said, ask Bob Thorne about how we sold flowers in the early days. So I did, and Bob wrote a most incredible letter, a page and a half, all thin type, because Bob likes to write, and he writes well. And that was a great piece that went to Rick. And then by the time we were able to get to visits in the hospital, his health was not well. Yeah. And then shortly after that, he did pass away. Yeah. And so we both have powerful memories about Rick, and you did do as well about his wife, I understand.
I did, yeah. So, Rick was like you said earlier, he had a great sense of humor. He loved to have fun. I couldn't go to a conference and sit next to Rick because he was messing with things all the time.
I know.
I know. And so if I really wanted to seriously take something in, but that was who he was. He was having fun all the time. And, as he went through his illness, it was really difficult on everybody. As you said, it was pretty much at the height of the pandemic. I think by the time he was diagnosed and at Helen Porter, we had all had the first vaccine, I think. Right. And anyway, I had the opportunity to visit with him several times. I didn't get there every week, but especially early on when he was at Helen Porter, I spent some time with him, and one of the most awful things is like the week before he passed, I stopped to Helen Porter to just see him. Like I'd stop by if I had a spare hour, to hang out, and there was a sign on the door that there were no visitors, right, because of COVID. They had locked it down, and so that week before he passed, I didn't get the opportunity to see him. Sure. So that was a little hard. Yeah. And of course, Barbara, his wife, worked for us as well, and she was a psychiatric nurse for us, a prescribing nurse, and she was awesome. And so Barbara and I sort of went through this together. His illness was, 9 months or so, maybe a little bit longer than that. He also, and so especially like once Rick wasn't at home, I mowed his lawn every day, or every week, I should say. So, and mowing the lawn took about 50 minutes, but talking with Barbara took about an hour before that. Mm-hmm. So
that's great.
I would let my wife know I'm going to go over and do Barbara and Rick's lawn, and I'll see you in a couple hours. Yeah. I was so glad that I did that. I made time for that and space for that. Barbara needed that, and really it was a couple of weeks after Rick passed, she had a tragic accident, and she also passed. Right. And this was really devastating for everybody in our organization. It was really very difficult to lose not just one of these wonderful people, but to lose both of them in such a short period of time.
Yeah. So, but that's the nature of that place and the people, and it makes all the difference. Being able to be there for each other and with each other. So I thank you for sharing this time, and we'll look forward to to the days ahead with your work with the counseling service, and we're looking forward to this continuing to be a very special place
Yes, I'm
and a
sure.
very special people. So thanks for the time today.
Thanks for inviting me, Len. This was fun.
Okay.